Let's take a look at some pictures so that we can better understand how the alveoli function in gas exchange. I want to start over here in the on the left side here, and we're going to look at a number of different things, including the blood flow. First, let's follow that blood flow. You'll recall that the blood that comes from the right side of the heart is going to flow into the pulmonary artery, and it will branch, of course, and then with each branch it's going to branch into smaller blood vessels until ultimately what we're going to see here is these blood vessels carrying deoxygenated blood that will form these capillary networks surrounding the alveoli in the respiratory system. And we don't see, in this particular picture, we don't see all of the blood vessels that are present, but the capillary beds that we see, and I want to look in particular at this one, let's outline it here in yellow. Okay, so you can kind of see that there. This vast network of capillaries, you're going to see as you do that the deoxygenated blood branches off, these different capillaries branch off, wrapping around those alveoli, and the deoxygenated blood will be closely associated with the alveoli and will pick up oxygenated blood, which is why we actually see this transition in color here. And so we see the rich red color suggesting that we picked up the oxygen. That I'm switching actually back to yellow just because the red doesn't show up when I'm drawing on a red blood vessel. Okay, so here's my red network of capillaries here, and you can see that they're going to converge into these venules, and the venules are going to converge into a branch of the pulmonary vein, and we're going to carry that oxygenated blood back to the heart. Okay, now I want to take a look at these bronchioles. Now you'll remember on a previous diagram I drew the bronchioles a little bit different. I simplified it, and so I drew just my thin layer of epithelial cells, and I'm going to outline that here, and you can see kind of this wavy like structure here of these epithelial cells right there. What I didn't draw on the previous picture, the hand-drawn picture, would have been the submucosal layers, the additional layers that are there. But let's look at this. Let's pick a color that's actually going to stand out. That's kind of the hard part, this choosing a good color. I guess we'll try this color. Here, you can see here, we've got my smooth muscle cells. And you can see more of these smooth muscle cells banded around the bronchioles here, okay? And the job of those smooth muscle cells are going to be to contract, as we've already talked about, so that they will constrict and cause bronchoconstriction. And what bronchoconstriction does, if we constrict our bronchioles, bronchoconstriction, just like vasoconstriction, bronchoconstriction results in less fluid flow, and in this the case that fluid is a gas, so we'll go ahead and call it air. Okay, and so as those smooth muscles constrict, that's what we're going to be doing, is we're going to be changing how much air flows into these alveolar sacs. And so I want you to see that. And then, so honestly, this is kind of a bit of an anatomy lesson, but I'm highlighting this so you understand function. Let's look at this right here. That's not a good color. We're going to say, okay, I guess we'll try this color. This little part right here that I'm coloring in purple here, that, if you follow this up and you look at this, is the nerve fiber. And in particular, that is the parasympathetic. The parasympathetic nerves. Now, you might say, now wait a second, in the previous slide you talked about the sympathetic nervous system having an effect on on bronchoconstriction. I remember that you talked about epinephrine, right? Well, it just so happens that the parasympathetic nervous system is the only neuron fibers that actually innervate those bronchioles, or more precisely the smooth muscles of the bronchioles. They're the only nerve fibers there. But the sympathetic nervous system still can help by causing bronchodilation, not because there are nerve fibers present, but because there are in fact sympathetic nerve fibers that run to the adrenal gland. And that adrenal gland can release epinephrine into the bloodstream. And look, I just showed you the vast network of capillaries that fill our lungs. And so we do not have direct sympathetic input to the bronchioles. We don't have those fibers there. But we do receive input or a signal from the sympathetic nervous system through the epinephrine. Now, while we're here, I also want to point out these, I keep picking yellow, and that's not going to be a good color. These fibers right here, these elastic fibers that you can see here, I bet you thought that they were capillaries, but they're actually these elastic fibers. And those have a very important role in the respiratory system, in that they're going to cause resistance to stretch, and they're going to cause this recoil that is necessary for lung function. If we look at these alveoli clusters, we go ahead and slice them open. You can see this cluster right here. I'll stick with the green here. You can see what my sacs look like, and each of these individual areas here are my alveoli. Whoops. And so these individual air pockets here, for my single would be alveolus, my plural is alveoli, and you can see those alveoli there. These little sections right here, let's go ahead and mark them here. These are just my airways where the air actually enters into my alveolar sacs. Last thing I want to point out here are my lymph vessels, and those are very important because, as we all know, that the respiratory system is one of the routes of entry that is commonly used for viruses and bacteria to penetrate our defenses. And so if the mucociliary escalator and the resident macrophages are not enough to keep us safe, we do have close proximity to the lymph system. We have our lymphocytes, which are present within the lymph system, and those can invade to provide additional protection against these pathogens and to combat illness within the lungs. And so that lymph vessels, those are critical there. Let's go ahead and look at the figure on the right here. And this is one I'm going to draw various versions of this figure. And you're going to see here the artery, so this would be coming from a main artery, right? And that would be carrying deoxygenated blood, and that would pass into the arterioles, which are the smaller blood vessels, and then from the arterioles we would enter into our capillary beds. So you can assume from about here to here, I suppose, is my capillaries. Now this drawing of course is simplified, but the exchange of gas would occur at this particular surface right here. And we're going to look at that, we're going to zoom in on that, and we're going to pay attention to that, because that particular exchange surface is critical to our ability to exchange gas.